to Shifting Design, the totally free virtual summit bringing together designers in the world of tech. Thanks so much for everyone that's joining us today. I'm David, and I'm a product design director at Deputy. Today is all about breaking your grid. So how can we be more influential and impactful designers in our roles? I don't know if anyone joined, but we had an amazing Instagram panel today at lunchtime, hosted by our wonderful Jacob, joined by Olivia from Eucalyptus and Sophie, a creative lead at Canva. It was so amazing, and their advice was just really inspirational. So you can actually go watch that later on Designing Deputy on Instagram. So I'd really recommend checking that out. And we have a whole bunch of really great events happening later in the week, which you can find on shifting.design. But right now, we're talking about thriving as a product designer, a topic I'm sure lots of us are very passionate about. And we have an amazing lineup of panelists joining us today. Felix, the co-founder at ADPList, Jack, product design lead at Style Arcade, Josh, principal product design at SafetyCulture, and Sandy, a senior product designer at Reejig. Before we get into it, I think it's important to acknowledge the country that we're in. So I'm joining you today from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and pay our respects to elders past and present. We recognize their continued connection to the land of this beautiful place and acknowledge that they never ceded sovereignty. So please share where you're from in the chat. One of the things that we love to see in all our panels, please just go off in the chat. Is there anything that people are saying that you resonate with? Just, share it. It's really great for everyone to see. And if you have any questions, please post that in our Q&A. We'll be answering as many questions as we can. And lastly, if you are sharing anything on social media, you can use our hashtag SD22. So let's get into it. I guess my first question for everyone, I ask you to all introduce yourself and kind of let us know, how did you get into product design? I'm always interested hearing everyone's journey. So Josh, do you want to start us off?
Absolutely. So great to be here. This is such an exciting time to get together with all these world-class designers. I'm super stoked. So yeah, my background and my kind of journey, I think like many people in kind of design today and product design, was a bit of a kind of non-traditional kind of background. I've been doing this for maybe 10, 12 years now, but I feel like I kind of grew up in product. I was always kind of like a nerd at heart as a little kid, kind of building my own computers and getting my first little kind of like Bondi Blue iMac and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of grew up in that kind of world of just like loving product and loving design and kind of falling in love with that kind of like Apple ecosystem that many of us did. I spent a number of years in Apple as kind of as a trainer and then kind of mentor and leader in that space. And then kind of made my shift slowly into kind of product. So I spent probably the last 7 or 8 years building and kind of designing and kind of delivering awesome products in loads of different industries. So it's really been such a fun journey for me, kind of tackling really complex industries from kind of the ground up, where you have to like learn all of 1965's like taxation code law on capital gains tax investment properties to like optical eye refraction inside lens correction. And so I've always loved the kind of real nerdy detail of everything. And so, yeah, now I kind of am in our design team here at SafetyCulture, which is such an awesome and exciting space to be. But yeah, it was kind of, I think like many of us that have kind of been in this industry for 10 years or more, like these roles didn't exist back then. There wasn't such a thing as a product designer. We kind of were web designers back then, and then kind of like UI and UX designers, and then that's kind of evolved into the kind of awesome industry we call product design now. So yeah, that's a bit on me.
Wonderful. Sandy.
Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here as well. I would say my journey is started a little bit earlier. My dream as a kid was to become a fashion designer at 8 years of age. That was like the blue sky of what my life would be like. But then as the years went by, I always loved everything design, from interior to fashion and jewelry, any of those things. And then as I'm originally half Norwegian, so I came from Norway, and I wanted to study abroad to experience diverse things and just travel and see the world. So I went with a very open mind and an open heart and did industrial design at UTS. So those courses were very fundamental for design thinking. So it kind of led me to being in this digital, UX, UI, product design space. But it was quite fun because I had a number of retail and hospitality jobs as I was studying. And that helped me become very, open and sociable. And in the end, then helped me a lot with customer research and relating to people's stories and problems. And now I am working at Reejig. I started this week and it's been a fantastic journey so far. And yeah, that's a little bit of an intro, I guess. Thank you.
Congratulations on the new role. And I love that story. How you talk about transferable skills is just so true. Jack.
Hi, everyone. So great to be here. And thanks, David, for introducing this workshop. So some of you, it's good to be with some familiar faces here too. Love the community. So I'm JACALIN. I'm based in Sydney, and my history starts very long ago. So I'm in uni. I majored in graphic design and digital media. Then graduated, and I would say started with graphic design, and that was 15 years ago. And then I transitioned into interaction designer. At the time, it was called interaction designer. Josh, you were mentioning that product design wasn't a thing, and it was like, okay, we kind of did a lot of like UX, UI related wireframe thing, and then maybe like 10 years ago, that's where every company, every agency I worked, like every client wanted an app. And I was like, okay, cool. It sounds like this is like a cool direction to go. So there I am back then, guys. Just a bit of history. We were designing apps with Photoshop, okay? So you guys, it's a good time to be alive for you guys. Just saying. But on the side note, right now I'm at Star Arcade as a product lead. I'm hiring designers, building a foundation for the design team in that company. On the side, I also consult a couple of design startups, and I also run webinars at General Assembly, occasionally mentoring at ADPList. And fun fact is I also have a little side hustle fashion label, which led me to be a bit more business thinking designer, I guess. So that's me.
Amazing. Very busy there, I could tell. And last but not least, Felix.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. This is such an amazing panel today, and I am truly humbled to be here. My name is Felix. I'm currently based in Singapore, and I'm the co-founder at ADPList. A little bit about how I got into product design was, I actually came from an engineering school as a student. I graduated about 4 years ago, and I stumbled across product design almost as an accident, if you will, because my team members in my school group projects, they just weren't interested into doing design, and I was the only one who was chasing the perfection of looking great, the usability and whatnot. And that's just how the engineering students are, and that's just how I am. And so I ended up learning a lot outside of classroom just to support the group projects within the school. And then I sort of fell in love with product design, and that was when I decided to dive in deeper. I freelanced for multiple startups and big companies around the world. I've served 2 years in the military service here in Singapore. And then, I went on to become the first design lead at GoTrade, which graduated from Y Combinator. It's more of like it's like a trading app here in Singapore. And then about a year later, in about 2020, I co-founded ADPList. If you've heard of ADPList, we are on a mission to democratize mentorship. We basically want to, provide an open and fair access to mentorship for everyone and anyone around the world to learn and grow together as part of this community. So I'm excited to be here today, David, with all of you, to share any knowledge and whatnot regarding product design. So thanks for having me.
Oh, we're so happy to have you. I mean, I just love the sheer diversity of backgrounds of everyone on this panel. It's just so inspiring to me. So obviously we're here today to talk a bit about thriving as a product designer. And I guess I'd be interested in hearing, like, what does that mean to you? And I guess in your career and in your role, like, what is your why? Maybe Jack, do you want to start us off?
Okay, I think the moment when I started to take a shift in my career, I would say, it's the moment when I am confident enough to go beyond an actual designer, but into almost, you are wearing multiple different roles now. Like you are not just a designer, but also you're a salesperson. When I say a salesperson, don't get me wrong, it's a good thing. It's about communicating with the stakeholders and then presenting your design in a reasonable and rational ways, telling them why certain things are done in a certain way. And then you're constantly half of your job. I always say 50% of your job is about influencing the culture in the company, bringing people on the team to do things together. And so that is when I really felt the power of being a designer that can really change directions and moving needles for business.
I love that. There's so much truth there, so much gold. Josh, I guess what are your thoughts on thriving as a product designer?
Yeah, and it's like that whole question around the why. Like, why do we get out of bed every day to do what we do, and then how do we do that really well? I think so many people that I've come across, and it was certainly for me, when you kind of like finally landed in that product design space, you kind of finally felt that you're like, oh yeah, this is actually what I've been wanting and kind of searching for. There's so many awesome kind of diverse backgrounds that so many of us have come from. And when you kind of finally land there, you're like, this kind of feels right. And so for me, that big like why, like what gets me out of bed every day, why I kind of come to work. And if someone was to give me $10 million and I was never to work again, why would I still kind of rock up and say, can I keep solving some problems, please? For me, it's always just been about people and relationships. So I think like one of those really empowering and just energizing things around product design for me is being able to kind of solve problems for real people, kind of make lives better. Sometimes that's really meaningful in delivering like, you know, life-saving technology to people that like is fantastic. And sometimes it's just more subtle, and it's just kind of making a big difference in someone's life and making a big difference for some small business out there that makes their life a little bit easier, that takes out some of those frustrations that we kind of have every day. And a part of that journey for me has always been that relationship we have with kind of the customers and the people and the products that we're trying to kind of build. And those are the same relationships that we try and foster with our own teams. Like one of the awesome powers of kind of design is it's a highly relational skill set in our product building businesses. Amongst kind of our engineering teams and our product management teams, our design teams are the ones that kind of tell stories, that kind of build relationships and set people onto that trajectory. And so that's kind of what really excites me, that you build those relationships through the work that you do for the customers that you're working for. So it's awesome.
Love that. I guess, Felix, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think just a quick one, to me, product design is really about, trying to do, trying to right the wrong things in the world. And I've always been about that, even at ADPList, we try to give access to people who had not have that before. And I think that it allows us to look at the world in a different perspective, be a little bit more creative, be a little bit different, be a little bit more bold in trying to help, elevate someone's life. And I think that gives, purpose, right? When you help someone, when you are able to give something, it always helps you to become a better human being. And so, I always think that, the only one thing that we all leave after we're gone, it's the inspiration, it's a legacy that you leave behind, that lives on forever. And so, I hope that, like our design work is able to do that, for the next generations.
And Sandy, like, what's your why?
Well, I feel like it's been answered so much by everyone here now, but yeah, I think working with teams is really what passionates me. Like, it makes me very passionate to work with people who have like awesome skills. When you're working in a product team, you have engineers, you have PMs, you have data analysts, you have a lot of knowledge from these people, and then getting them to feel passionate and motivated and inspiring them, because as Josh was saying, we are the storytellers, and we're somehow like the link between the people who are using this product or service and what we're building, as well as companies. And so I think that to me is my biggest drive, and that's what gets me up in the morning.
I love that. I love how so many of the answers are really about kind of the people that we work with and the customers that we're serving with the work we're doing, not about the craft so much, but it's kind of the end result and the people behind it. Like, I love that. So obviously we've got a lot of people attending today and they would love to kind of, thrive as a product designer. So I guess to get right to it, I guess what's your kind of top tip? If you kind of had one tip you wanted to share with someone, like a mid-level product designer that's really looking to take it to the next level, like what would you tell them to do? Josh?
I think the trend is going to kind of continue where for me it's building relationships, right? Like that's kind of the mission that we're on about. And I think what lets us get really good at doing our jobs is our ability to kind of build really good relationships in our teams. It helps us kind of elevate our work, elevate the people around us. And I think there's kind of like two parts to that problem, which is helping identify shared language. The more we can kind of talk using the same language as the people we're communicating to, the better those conversations go and the better we build those relationships. And that needs to like adjust, right? Like that's a real art form of like when we're sitting down talking to kind of engineers or product managers or our leaders or our investors, they're very different conversations and the language that we use needs to kind of resonate with that audience. But the other part to it, I think, is just real authentic vulnerability. I think these are just kind of like the key tenets of any relationship building exercise, whether that's in our personal lives or our professional lives, but the rules are the same. Building great relationships means being really authentic and being really vulnerable. And that opens a lot of really amazing work to happen where you can kind of unlock amazing potential in the people around you, where people feel like they can kind of step up and contribute and help and assist and find value in this whole kind of cause that we're on together. So it's about relationships for me. It's about that kind of vulnerability, that language that we share and how we make those work really well. And I think that's what takes you from that edge of being a kind of good designer that puts really cool stuff down onto a page to kind of being able to lead organizations into what is great design work.
I love that. I have witnessed Sandy building great relationships firsthand. So I guess I'll throw it to you. I guess how would you recommend that people build kind of strong cross-functional relationships and stakeholder relationships?
Okay, you want your team to love you and the work that you do so that they actually want to put that forward and produce that. But and you want to love them too. But I guess a lot of it is bringing people on the journey, like being transparent with the work that you're doing, such as, showing wireframes early on and seeking people's feedback, like, is this actually feasible? Can we produce this? How can we negotiate that? And I think through being a little bit cheeky, through showing your personality, through like having more personal relationships especially with the people that you're immediately working with, you can build those very strong bonds with people, and I think that's when you're able to produce like almost like magic. And so I would recommend just have those relationships, even if it means that you're having coffees with people and not necessarily talking about work. That's like, it's a bonus that you can actually make some, perhaps not friendships, but like some stronger relationships with those people. You're working with them like 8 hours a day, like so many hours of the week. So you kind of like, you're probably also happier if you have somehow like stronger bonds.
100%. I guess, Felix, do you have any advice on kind of building strong relationships like in your team or with stakeholders?
Well, I think, it's always interesting to, think about building great relationships. And in fact, that's one of the key things as a designer that you should do, but also as someone who is just building something in general. One of the key things that we advocate for at ADPList is to be community first and community obsessed. And that means that, we practically put community above anything else. And I think one of the things that you want to build relationship with stakeholders is to be able to, treat your first employee or your first customer or your first user the same way as you would treat the millionth customers, the same way that you would treat the millionth sort of like, employees. and whatnot. Because one of the things that I see often as leader is that, you sort of like change your behavior. Like people usually treat the first person really well, and then like the 1 billion or the 1,000 people, not so, right? But I think that, your attention should always be almost the same, otherwise that dedication or that commitment should, always remain there. And even up to today, as people sign up on ADPList and whatnot, my contact still remains the same. I still reach out to them personally. I want to make sure that, I stay true to this mantra, and so that, people can almost feel the essence of you are being absolutely genuine in, creating this relationship with them.
I love that, like really sticking to strong principles. Jack, any thought? I guess there's actually a quote from your LinkedIn that I really loved that you've written about thinking like a business person, but with the heart of a designer. I guess, how do you feel like that comes out in relationships with stakeholders and colleagues?
I feel like you just read my mind because I was thinking, okay, all these relationship gold has been spread out. What am I going to focus on? And I was thinking, oh, actually, the question was kind of like, how do we thrive as a product designer? And I think for me, the moment when it's starting to make a lot of sense, it's when I start to quantify qualities. Meaning design is always a qualitative process. We are trying to make people feel great, feel happier, work better in lots of different qualitative ways. But as product designers, once you get to a certain stage where beyond the user part, it's how do we connect the user with the business logics. And I think we must start to learn, and as early as you can, to sit on the table and start to learn how to quantify all of the qualitative stuff that you do. And I think I deliver this message to my general assembly classes. It's like everything they do, I want to start to define by what's the success looks like. How do we measure the success, and how do we utilize that research to iterate and make decisions on future designs. And I think it's because ever since I started that little side hustle of mine, I was forced to look at numbers. And I swear to God, any one of you who has been through design schools, we have not been taught how to look at numbers. And that pisses me off because I didn't know how to use Excel sheet. And then I was like, oh my God, I have to start looking at all these business numbers, zero accountings, oh my God, all of this crazy thing. But slowly, I was sort of like forcing myself to that uncomfortable path, and starting to look at the number, even though I didn't like it, but linking the number into what action point I should be making. And it definitely is, change making. And I feel like every designer, if you have a chance, it's probably a next step for your career path could be starting to read how business evolve based on design. There's a really good article on McKinsey written about the business of design, which is sort of like quantifying how design-led business over the last 10 years time. They had grown 228% better return to their stakeholders on the share market on the S&P 500. So like great article. And I think that is one of the key things. If you can start to connect business numbers with your design, with the human, and then it will start to become like a full circle.
I love that. It really just speaks to like the impact of our work and understanding it to like further your career. We had a great question coming in the Q&A. How can I improve my leadership skills as a product designer? I'd love to take the initiative in projects and design team activities, but I don't know how. Felix, you kind of had a go answering. I guess, do you want to maybe start us off?
Yeah, for sure. So, one of the things that I've learned through my career, and especially when I was in the military service, is that, if you want to be a leader, you first have to be a good follower, right? And that is servant leadership, we call it, right? And so at ADPList, I think one of the things that we practice a lot is servant leadership, practicing how to be a good follower, understanding what a good leader feels like, I think. And one of the things that we talk about is being smart and being wise. Right? Being smart is basically people who knows what they want, but being wise is knowing what you don't want, right? And so, you kind of want to know what you don't want in the leader and what you don't want to do as a leader. And so I think always, the first step is always to begin, by being a follower, always have this servant leadership mindset. Now, when you feel like you're ready to take on, right? We always say that, you know, the opportunity has to be present for you, or you have to ask for it, you have to step up for it, right? And, you know, obviously, if you want to be a leader, you have to only learn by doing it as well, right? So when the opportunity is present, or whenever there's a chance for it, you know, I would say grab it, go ahead, you know, step up. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, because you will. Don't try to avoid it, you will. Own it up and just move forward with being a leader, right? Because you only truly learn when you're doing it. Yeah, so that's my advice. So to sum it up, I think being a servant leader is important. You know, being understanding what you don't want, you know, in leadership, and then finally jumping into an opportunity, you know, and practice it for yourself. Yeah.
Love that. Josh, do you have any thoughts on kind of how to take the initiative if you're not sure how?
Yeah, I think it's what Felix was saying is so true, in that, like, if you look at some of the best leaders that you are around, and often when we reflect on our own careers, some of the best leaders we ever had are those leaders that are there serving other people. And so I think that kind of real attitude of there to kind of serve others is what ends up kind of elevating us into, when it's hard if you kind of find a goal and say, that's the kind of goal that I want. It means you have to make a number of decisions on that pathway that may discount what other people need and want, and other people around you. And so the more you can kind of turn your attitude into that desire to simply help those around you. And again, for me, it ties so much back to these kind of relationships that we build, this authenticity that we establish between our kind of people around us and our teams. That's kind of some of those first steps that you'll start to take into kind of leadership, where if you're kind of really authentically kind of bearing with people that that's something you're really passionate about, and the reason why you're passionate about that is because you want to help and you want to kind of see all these things happen. And like, those are the things that kind of slowly take you down that pathway.
Yeah, that's great. Sandy, do you have any thoughts?
I feel like you can also get some advice and mentorship from people. Like, oftentimes the people that you're admiring are doing things that you could take note of and start applying in your day-to-day, but you can also just, you know, with humility, like, ask them, hey, how do you go about this and that, and get some proper, like, you know, one-on-one with people. I think that's truly very, very useful.
Yeah, that's great. Leading into a really good topic. I guess, Sandy, continuing with you, I guess, how has networking and mentorship helped you to grow in your career?
It's been everything. I've been very, very lucky to have great mentors in all of my workplaces. I've worked with amazing people with, you know, soft skills and just crafting skills as well. But if you aren't in that position right now, then I would suggest going on to ADPList and trying to meet up with people that have those skills or those things that you want to learn from them. So having an intention is really important. Having a little reality check, a little retro with yourself, like, what areas are you lacking in and how can you improve them? Maybe you don't know the how, but at least you are aware of the areas that you need to improve. Then slowly you can find out how you're gonna go about, you know, changing those bits in those areas, improving those areas.
Love that. Jack, I know that obviously you teach at GA and that you're a mentor on ADPList also. I guess, how has mentorship helped you in your career and also being a mentor?
Everything. Second on Sandy's feedback, 100%. Oh my God. Like, if I may, I will share that little story when GA approached me to teach. And that is absolutely crazy because, first of all, I, believe it or not, I used to be like this really self-conscious, and I would hardly put myself out there on the public speaking platform. So when GA approached me, I was instantly going, oh my God, okay, it's very scary, but I am going to throw myself out there, right? Like, I love a rough patch. And then, so as soon as I did, it's like a whole another world that I started to discover. The ability, because you're presenting to a group of people who's looking to absorb new information, and you will be able to observe their user experience in the real time and be able to react to that in the real time, and making sure, and almost like you can feel it without having to speak to them, by observing their facial expressions, their body language, all of that kind of stuff. And that to me was like, it doesn't get better than this as a UX designer, to be put on the spot and react to a real user, real life sort of like process feedback session, if you will. So and the more I do it, the more I was obsessed with it. So there's no brainer when me and Felix actually met through another Slack channel way before the pandemic, right? And we sort of just connected on LinkedIn. But like when pandemic happened and Felix shared the ADPList, the first thing I was like, here we go, let's do this, another platform for us to like make a difference. And it kind of established my new vision as a human. It's like, I want to make an impact. And I want to make an impact at work. When I'm, as a product designer, I'll be able to help a business create solutions to solve a lot of business or people's problems. But on the side, if I was able to make an impact on the individual level, that is satisfying as well. So like, we are all human every day looking for gratification, and that is amplification in that sense, definitely.
Love that. So much gold there. I love having a vision for yourself, and also how you can put yourself through a rough patch, like challenging yourself to grow as quickly as possible. Felix, I imagine you might have a few thoughts on the power of mentorship.
Yeah, for sure. I'll just sum it up. I think Jacqueline, Josh, and Sandy had shared amazing insights about that. I'll just sum it up that as human beings, I think we all have 24 hours and 7 days. So what I'm trying to say here is that we all have very, very limited time to learn and to grow, right? There's so many books that I personally want to read. I procrastinate so much that I don't read them. But imagine this, right? There's so many things that you can learn in the world that you can actually skip, so many mistakes that you could have made just by spending 30 minutes with someone else over a coffee chat, over a simple 30 minutes or 15 minutes mentorship session. Hear their stories, hear their experiences, hear their advice. You could be going through the same thing, or you might be going through the same thing, but it really helps you to accelerate that. And given that we all have 24 hours, I think spending 15 to 30 minutes actually kind of extend that a little bit. You are technically absorbing some knowledge from someone else's 24 hours. And that's why I love mentorship so much, just because, you are able to accelerate your own growth by so much just by spending so little time with someone else. Yeah, so that I'll just put it that way. It's really a way for you to accelerate your own growth as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, what I love about mentorship is it's not just for the mentee. Like, you learn so much as a mentor from talking to other people and getting other people's perspectives. It's just super valuable. So slightly shifting topics, we've had a couple questions about managing stakeholders, especially if they don't see eye to eye. How can I get better talking to stakeholders? Sometimes I find it intimidating speaking to people that have been with the company for such a long time and have so much background knowledge. How would you deal with that kind of situation, Josh?
These are the hardest parts of all of our careers. It's why you get asked these questions in every interview, and why you should be preparing answers to those questions all the time and looking back on all of the scenarios of where you had to do this. This is the hardest part of your job. And I think it's often easy to try and sum it up in one word, but it is really situational, depending on, what you're trying to resolve and what the kind of the stakes are and stuff like that. Like if you're in a situation where it's kind of do or don't, kind of live or die on one particular decision, and you really strongly believe it's one way or the other way, at some point you have to get pragmatic as to when you decide to let go. I think we can often go down that route of like stakeholder management and kind of fighting for what we kind of believe in and all that kind of stuff. And there's amazing ways that we can kind of do that and do that really well. But you also have to be prepared that when you go down that journey that you may not win, and that's okay. And you have to be able to handle that, and also like step away from that conversation, still friends with the person that you're having this conversation with. I think that's kind of the biggest challenge in this, is not just how do we kind of get through one particular piece of conflict. It comes from trying to talk the same language, kind of making sure we're trying to focus on, you know, what is the actual thing we're trying to solve here? Like, we're just really doing a lot of clarifying to make sure we're talking all the same language. But at some point, you also have to be ready to say, like, this decision isn't defining our relationship. This is, you know, something separate to that. But yeah, I mean, I could share stories and stories from decades, but I think a big trend for me is the ability to be able to let go of the decision. I think it's often something that we struggle to do as designers. We have a real connection to the kind of work and soul that we pour into stuff. Like, we're in a creative kind of space, and it's a bit of an art form for us. And so many of us find it really difficult to separate our work from our personality and feel like it's always a personal attack if we disagree, and we're kind of saying, but we really like it this way. And, you know, so I think that ability to kind of separate those two is really important with your ability to kind of navigate those. It's for your own mental health, and it's for your ability to be able to talk objectively about the thing you're trying to solve.
Yeah, so important, like separating your relationship with a person versus the feedback on like one piece of work. Sandy, I guess, do you have any thoughts on managing a stakeholder, especially one you don't agree with?
Sometimes, you know, why don't you agree with it? Is it because, what, like, are you very married to your own design kind of thing? Like, being able to see things holistically and then kind of making up your mind. And also, if you're wrong, you need to be able to change your mind, like, and realize that, oh, actually, I am going for the wrong thing. And yeah, being able to change directions or come up with different solutions, I think it's really important. But I guess it's not necessarily a skill, it's more like a mindset, or almost like principles, or your own personal kind of, you're representing your work ethics, right? Like, yeah, you're able to be agile and to change your mind and to like fundamentally want the best product, to kind of make it out there or make the best ethical choice for whatever kind of decision you're making. So yeah, those things I would say.
Love it. I guess, Felix, has dealing with stakeholders changed now you're a co-founder?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it has changed in terms of the team size. And as a team grows, you kind of have to, you know, not just empathize with the people around you, but also the people around them as well, right? Because it kind of like, you know, there's a ripple effect to that. So I think it's important. You know, I often say that 90% of my problems these days actually come from stakeholder management, and I'm very serious, right? Look, you could have the best design, you could have the best designers, but you have to learn how to manage them. You have to learn how to manage those expectations. And so I think that has become my day-to-day job per se. I've grown a lot through there, but I think most importantly is, you know, back to the same principle again, is to treat the first person that you hired as the, you know, as the 15%, as 100%, you know, always give that same amount of dedication, attention, and that same amount of spirit as well. So yeah.
Yeah, amazing. And Jack, I guess one thing, I guess, to add on to it, before we were talking about, I guess, soft skills and how important that is. And to me, that ties in so strongly with this theme of stakeholder management. So I guess, how would you, one, deal with stakeholders, but also kind of work to improving those soft skills?
Oh, that's such a great question. I can go all day with soft skills. The biggest soft skills, in my opinion, is obviously storytelling, because we often, I mean, if I say storytelling, what do you think the kind of format that means? You know, like we often restrict ourselves to link storytelling with one form of delivery, but it is not. It's like a song, a piece of music, a video, a sketch, some screen put together, a storyboard, all of that. All of this is storytelling. But of course, there is writing as well. There is like role plays. All of these are story technique. It's like storytelling has a bucket on its own of tools. And so I feel like designers, if you are creative enough, like Josh mentioned earlier, take your time to understand different stakeholders' language, take your time to understand what do they care about, what's if you're trying to convince them with the user's perspective, what's the best way to deliver those information? Is that via a piece of article, or is that via, sometimes you go as far as editing a video to construct a little piece of like feedbacks together so that it's easier, digestible, biteable for them, and they feel a bit more empathized with the design direction that you're going. And I think storytelling is definitely the top soft skills. I feel like a lot of the times, like the junior portfolios that I've been looking at, storytelling, it's usually overlooked by over amount of text on a piece of case studies, right? So, I mean, that to me as a viewer, the storytelling is probably not there because it's quite easy for me to just skim through everything. It doesn't capture attention on the very important piece of information that's hidden under the body copy, anything out over 3 lines that nobody reads, that kind of thing. So I feel like it's a combination. That is the creative part. It's like, how do we combine different type of media in order to deliver the key information to the right people with the right language, with the right data sets?
Yeah, love that. We have a great question from Jenny. We've been talking a lot about continued growth, but how do you take care of yourself and avoid burnout while growing? Sandy, do you have any thoughts?
Many, but let me pick one of the many thoughts that I have. Don't take, like, yeah, everyone wants to grow, right? But I think if you're approaching it with like an open heart, like, you know, you're being vulnerable, you're reaching out to mentors, you're trying to like connect with other people to grow with others as well. It's not just like your own kind of thing that you're doing by yourself in silo, you know, in a little room kind of thing. Like I think you have to be able to talk to other people who are in your same journey, like also trying to learn, and don't take it too serious. Like in the end, you will grow no matter what happens, because you become more mature, you become more confident in yourself, and your craft improves by the day. Like I see designs that I did a year ago and I'm like, damn, like that's really bad. Then I see probably in the future, I will kind of feel the same thing. So you will grow no matter what. But I think like, just, trying is good, but trying too hard and like making yourself tired is probably not that great. So I would say like, be able to dedicate some time to your hobbies as well. If your hobbies are, I don't know, like playing the guitar or going and playing with your band, then do that. Don't stop your life just because you want to grow your career.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's a marathon, not a race. So, you know, look after yourself. Don't take it too seriously. Josh, I guess, how do you work to avoid burnout?
Yeah, I mean, I think that thing with like growth and burnout, like the reason that growth causes burnout is because of timelines, right? So the reason why we have these big ambitious goals, or this really big project that has so much to do that we kind of have to go flat out, the root cause of often burnout is just purely timelines. I mean, if you're trying to figure out how you grow in your kind of career and you write down, this is kind of where I want to be in 2 years, and so I kind of going to have to do all it, and you start to just like work so hard to try and kind of get to this goal. Often it's the timeline that is dictating your burnout. And so I try and always think of stuff to break it down into, what is the goal that you're trying to get at? What are you trying to grow at right now? Where are you trying to be in 2 or 3 or 5 years or whatever it is? And not how long is it necessarily going to take you to get there, but what are the steps that you need to do to get there? And you do those steps as you have the capacity to do those steps, because your life is going to go through different, you're going to have different capacity on different days. You're going to have good weeks and bad weeks. If you have 2 young kids like I do, and you don't have sleep for 3 months, for 3 years or 5 years, or however long that's going to last, you have to figure out how you spread those things out. But what kind of gives you confidence to kind of continue moving forward is like, you don't have to try and do 3 years of growth in one go. Break it down into the steps that you have to take. It's the same way that we deal with projects and burnout and businesses that have burnout, is break this stuff down into the steps that we need to take to achieve this. And we can put timelines on them when it's suitable, but don't put them on too early.
Yeah, that's great. Jack, I saw you in the chat. Do you have any thoughts on burnout?
Oh my God, this is I'm super, super extremely passionate about this topic. And every single time I meet a designer, I'm always asking them, what are you doing for fun outside of design? And and when someone takes a long time to think about that question, I'm like, okay, girl or boy, you got to take some time to figure that out and just stick with it. Personally, I've written out 5 things that brings me joy on the wall. Every single day, I do 2 of those things, non-negotiable. If that means going out for a walk for an hour, if that means I'm listening to a podcast or doing yoga, any of those things, like you have your own list and you need to know what brings you joy. So please, everyone, this is another self-reflective, self-awareness techniques that we constantly have to do. And it's pressure. There's so much going on. LinkedIn, wow, everything. So like trying to just like lock down the social media for a day or the weekend or something, and just like maybe just do gardening for the whole weekend. I don't know, but you need to know what brings you joy that's completely outside of this computer. Personally, I don't turn on my computer over the weekend, and I do not work at nighttime. And sometimes I will go for a walk in the morning. I start at 10 o'clock. And you've got to be okay with it. The employee is going to be okay with it. It's how you want to roll your life, and that's going to make you a happier designer, and you can only do great work if you are a happy designer.
I love that. Doing what we can every day to bring joy like into our own lives is super powerful. Felix, I saw you said maybe you're not the best person to talk about burnout, but we spoke about something earlier that I thought is related about prioritization. Like, how do you think about what work is the most important and how you should approach that?
Sure. I'm definitely not the best person to talk about sort of like taking breaks, because, I think Jacqueline probably knows me. I go on my laptop every weekend as well. Yeah, I think, I sort of like see it almost as like, sort of like fun to me. But I'll admit though, like not everyone can spend such an amount of time at work and still remain like sane. And I do that actually by maintaining what I call like a good morning routine. In a way, I call it like the miracle morning. So I wake up, I do meditation, have some workout, within the routine, read some books as well. And so that kind of like, fills me up, right? And I think one of the very good analogy that I say, it's like, our life is almost like a water bottle, right? And then stress is almost like a hose of water running through into the bottle, and at some point it's going to get full, right? When it gets full, that's when you burn out, right? But actually what you can do through your life or through your day is actually by poking holes into the water bottle, so that even as stress comes in, there's some stress that actually goes out. And how do you poke those holes is actually through different activities, right? Through reading, meditation for me, working out and whatnot, right? And so I think that's actually one of those things that I keep sort of like alive and allows me to actually even do things on the weekends. Do not recommend anyone actually, but I think there are some people who's able to do that. And on the other side, I think I like to always tell people that, whenever you have a task that could just only take 1 to 5 minutes of your time, just do it right away, right? Just do it right away, because if you procrastinate that 5 minutes task, or like that 3 minutes, 1 minute task, it's just gonna be there forever, right? And so I like to do the 1 to 3 minutes task as soon as it comes in, and then I just get it out of my way, and then I just continue with what I'm doing. Yeah, so those are the tips that I would have.
Love that. I really know the pain of procrastinating those 1 minute tasks. So I love this question from Chloe. Just let's do a rapid fire round. Like, what do you like to do for fun to relax? Josh?
I ride my bike.
Sandy?
I'm painting my room.
For fun.
Jack?
I'm obsessed with plants.
Wow.
Felix?
I go for runs.
Love it. So we have a question about how do you add, I guess, bring in design process into an early stage startup? Does anyone have any thoughts on how to approach that?
Say it again.
Oh, I think I could go first on that. Yeah, thanks for voting me, Jacqueline. So I've been a designer in the startup, ever since I was a designer. I would say so myself. I actually got a role at Facebook, but didn't want to go there just because I love startups so much. And I think one of the key things that being a designer in a startup is knowing that you are more than often probably the first designer, or you'll be the only designer for some time actually. And you should be able to sort of like take pressures from all different sides of the startup, from data side to engineering side and product management. But I think one way to thrive in a startup as a designer is to actually continuously talk to your users and be able to, take like extremely bold risk actually. I think there's a notion that goes around that, we have to do the research, we have to do proper user testing. And I could tell you that that's the fallacy of those, because, in a startup, you lack two things, right? In a startup, there is two things that you don't get the luxury of as compared to in a bigger corporation. And that is time and that is resources. You don't get resources as much, you don't get time as much. The moment this idea is planted, it probably has to be designed in the next 1 week or two. So it's, you have to get on Figma, you have to get on everything. So there's not a lot of chance that you could actually dive into very, very deep research or very deep testing. So the next time that someone in a startup is telling you that they're doing proper research for the next 3 months, I would not hesitate to call that out, right? Maybe they're just not moving fast enough. But in a real, in the true spirit of Silicon Valley, those features get built in 2 weeks. It goes through minimal research and minimal testing, and that's how it goes. And as a designer, that is not your typical process, but you have to be comfortable with it. You have to be able to learn really, really fast within that 2 weeks, and kind of get things out as well. So that's kind of my take on that, is to be comfortable with moving extremely, extremely fast.
Yeah, love that. Slightly shifting topic, we had a question for you, Josh, from Serena. You were talking before about relationships and building empathy. So do you have any tips or examples for how to build relationships in our teams by communicating authentically and vulnerably?
Yeah, I think it starts with you, right? You have to be the first one to start to take these little steps. I think part of that is finding out what a lot of this language is that you share, right? And that is kind of a really key and tricky part to start that journey, because engineers use different language to founders and investors and all that kind of stuff. And especially if you're potentially someone that sits in the more agency kind of world of things, trying to establish some of that language that your customers in different industry uses. And it's some of those stories I was talking about at the very beginning of having to learn every single tax law from 1965 onwards. So I understood, and I didn't do that because I wanted to know that particular knowledge. I was passionate about understanding that stuff so I could talk the same language, so that when we kind of sat down to have conversations, they felt that I wanted to be there, that I was really intent on talking the same language as them. I wasn't trying to just fluff everything in my kind of design talk and my kind of process. I was there to talk to them, and that meant a lot to me. And so I think the vulnerability part just starts with you being able to kind of open up. What are the things that you're kind of wrestling with this, and kind of bearing those for people? Often that will be me kind of sitting down, working through some really complex problems and saying I'm kind of understanding this, but I'm not seeing what's going on here. I don't think I've quite figured that out. That kind of ability for us to kind of admit a lot of that stuff about where we're at, where our understanding is at, is the start of that vulnerability piece. We shouldn't try and hide behind all of the answers, or kind of say, oh, I'll take that on board, and yeah, we can talk about that more next time, and then try and get a bunch of research and other stuff done, and just acknowledge that stuff kind of up front. It helps people relax a whole lot more, I've found, and feel like they can contribute. They can kind of fill that gap for you. When you do that by using the same language as them, you've already kind of come to that party wanting to talk. And so then when you open up these things that you don't understand, that you're not quite sure about, it makes it a whole lot easier for them to then kind of join you in that. It's hard when sometimes it's one way, and sometimes it's one way for a really, really long time. But I also don't think you should change your attitude to that just because it doesn't work with one person. I've had so many times where I have not thought of someone as a kind of ally for many, many years. They kind of seemed very aggressive to everything that I did. But when I was leaving that business, he kind of came into my office and he said, I just wanted to kind of just say that you kind of completely changed my attitude towards this type of work. It's just the way that you kind of conducted yourself. My jaw was on the floor. Like, I could not believe these words were coming out from this guy's mouth. But I think that gave me a lot of confidence early on in my career to stick to the stuff that I felt was right in those conversations, regardless of whether it was kind of well received on the other end.
I love that story. Sandy, I have another question for you. There's so many complementary skills that you can improve as a designer, coding, motion design, business thinking. Sometimes it can get overwhelming because you don't know what to pick for your career. Like, how do you know what your career needs and what skills you should focus on?
Oh my God, this is a really good question and a little bit hard to answer. But what I would do is that perhaps what comes the most natural to you, do that first, because then at least you're on a roll. And then once you have that going on, you can then start to see okay, what other things interest me? How can I improve those skills as well? That's how I would start. Yeah, I would start by doing that. But for example, in product design, right, you have to have skills in, I don't know, wireframing, then some soft skills to tell the story and understand the why and get the team vibe up and running so that, the velocity of, building and starting to create those relationships with the engineers is really important, right? So there's a bunch of things that you kind of need to improve when you're first starting off. And it's almost yeah, you want to build that first layer, the foundational layer, and then just kind of put it in coats of paint. Sorry, I'm painting my room, so everything's now coats of paints. So I would say, yeah, just start on if you're looking into product design, start with what comes more natural. For example, if it's customer research, then you start off with more, customer research focused, and then you build on later on you build on the wireframing and more the UX and then the UI, and yeah, those are your coats of paint.
Thanks, Sandy. Jack, a question for you. As a product designer, how do you quantify success for something as complex as feelings or the voice of the customer?
Oh, that is a tricky question. Let me think. I think usually, so before you do any research, you have some sort of either discussion guide or, designers know you've got to come up with a plan, right? What kind of goal that we wanted to achieve? What kind of data we wanted to discover? So you write down the rough goals that you wanted to achieve, then you go for whatever research that it's usually qualitative. It's interviews, let's say. So when customer is telling you a certain way, you may have a collection of different feeling words, and you may just quantify it into how many times people said that they felt this way, and then so you group it accordingly. It's probably going to be a little bit of a blurry process, but you've got to start to go generally speaking, if customer says they are confusing, that's a qualitative word, but how many people says confusing? That's the way to quantify it. So that's the simple way to do these kind of things. And then slowly you may be able to link those keywords, link those feelings into how your product usability is behaving, and then dig deeper in layers.
That's great, thank you. One last question for you, Felix. As the only designer in a startup, what's the fastest way to improve your skills when there's no other designers to learn from?
Yeah, I think if there's no other designers to learn from in a way contactable, I think the best way to learn is to always start by trying to imitate someone that you admire or something that you like. Actually, I think imitation, actually getting inspiration from someone, that imitation actually, sort of teaches you a lot, right? I think I've learned that through as well, when I was playing sports, sort of you want to imitate the best people, their work ethics, their skills, the moves and whatnot, it kind of allows you to be there. And then, once you're there, obviously you could start innovating by yourself. But I would often say that, our path all looks very similar. So, don't be afraid to kind of, see what others are doing, learn from their journey as well. Even though you might not be in touch with that person, it's always worthwhile to kind of observe what people are doing and then try it out, yourself as well.
Yeah, and of course, reach out for mentorship. Wow, that was amazing. I have loved learning from all of you. That was so fascinating. So just quickly, I'll do a rapid fire. I guess, where can people find you? Is there anything you want to plug? Josh?
Just hit me up on LinkedIn. That's the easiest.
Sandy?
Same, or find me on Instagram or Facebook, anywhere.
Cool. Jack?
Yeah, LinkedIn, 100%. It's my favorite social media, sad but true. And then there is like, I'm trying to do this YouTube channel thing. I'll try to put more content. Instagram, not very active on that. Sometimes I do put things, but LinkedIn.
Amazing. And Felix?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn as well. And then these days, a lot more on Twitter. So I'm going to put my link in the chat. You guys can connect with me there as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That was the second day of Shifting.